Okay, thanks a lot and welcome. Who here has been to any of my other previous talks here? Only a few. Okay, that's good. So hopefully that means I'm not going to be repeating myself on any of the points here. So I just know, kind of what the general layout here is. So the talk today is AI will be replaced. Now, that's a slightly clickbaity, shall we say, title. And the whole point about, tools that you can use, you'll find out in a little bit as I talk about it. I'm actually slightly reframing this, not just about tools specifically, but more about sort of techniques and approaches. The reason being is that, as you've probably noticed if you've been following anything in AI, tools change. I mean, what's funny is some of the notes, when I asked AI to actually write up and so I was brainstorming some of this, it was like, tools change every 6 months. I'm like, 6 months? It's not even 6 weeks, it's 6 days, right? Things seem to be changing. So things change very, very rapidly. So I will cover some very specific sort of tools towards the end, but the main goal of this is to really talk about the approaches, the skills, etc. needed to be able to use whichever tools that you pick up, right? And how to use them and look at them. So it's not like an app list. This is more a series of approaches, right? And everything I show you here, I'm going to show you a number of demos of some stuff that I've created. So kind of all of this stuff is real. It's all based upon things that I'm doing at the moment. It's not theoretical. It's all very much out there at the moment. So okay, so some of you might have seen this meme before. Again, this topic is a little bit of an interesting one at the moment. So the idea that, okay, well, AI, some people are like, AI is going to replace everything. Everybody's going to be out of a job. What are we going to do? Some people are saying the opposite and saying, well, you're not going to be replaced by AI. You're going to be replaced possibly by someone who knows AI. So really, your best approach here is to take the bull by the horns, learn about AI, use AI as a superpower. Now, if you see that sort of cartoon there with the farmer and the horse, you won't lose your job to a tractor, but to a horse that learns how to drive a tractor. You can kind of see there's a little bit of absurdity in that, but hopefully throughout this talk we can find sort of the middle way between it. Now, in the last 24 hours, as I have been putting the finishing touches on these slides, we've had Block. If people know of Block, they have just axed 4,000 of their 10,000 workflows. So 40%, probably one of the sort of largest sort of single tech layoffs in at least recent history, for a company that's not sort of shutting down, right? And they attribute a fair amount of that towards AI. Jack Dorsey's actually said a lot of it is due to overhiring during COVID. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle of those two. But in the last 24 hours, we've had that. We've had Anthropic basically tell the US government that no, they can't remove the safety clauses from their contract. The US government then turn around and say, okay, well, we're designating you a risk to the nation. And then OpenAI pop up and say, with almost identical terms, and the US government decide to go for them. And then just this morning, the US government go and invade Iran. So that's just in 24 hours. Now, some of that has stuff to do with what we're talking about. Some of it doesn't. But just to say, we are in obviously a very, I don't need to tell you this, a very, very changing world geopolitically. And AI does definitely at the moment seem to be a part of that. So when we're talking about replace, a lot of people are thinking about my job is going to be replaced. What I'd like to try and do is reframe that as tasks are going to be replaced, right? So you as an individual, your job may change, your job title may change, the types of things you do may change, but that doesn't mean in, I would say, the majority of cases. There's obviously certain cases where people will, no doubt, unfortunately, lose jobs due to AI, but I think it's more of a case of being able to use those tools to actually better do the tasks that you may already be doing or allow you to do other tasks in a different or more efficient way. So that's how I want to kind of reframe that. So I want to talk about embracing the notion of sort of starting where you are currently, right? So look at what you are currently doing and see whether there is a need that you can address with AI around some tasks you're doing, some challenge you're facing, whether in your community, whether in your work, and actually use that. Don't wait for any kind of external validation or hesitation. Don't wait for permission. Just go out there and build. So who am I standing up here? My name is Matt Hamilton. I have worked for a number of tech companies over a tech career of about 30 years. I moved to Barbados about 5 years ago, now on the welcome stamp. And as I'll show you in this talk, I've been building a number of tools in and around AI and solving problems using AI, right? And a lot of these tools, a lot of these projects I'll show you are probably things that the average person probably doesn't think of as AI. And that's, I think, one of the things we need to slightly challenge, is that a lot of people have a quite valid skepticism or fear of AI, especially when we're talking about sort of jobs and things. But there's a number of ways in which AI can be used. I believe there's a lot of ways in which AI can be used for good, right? And can be used in a way that some people, like I said, might not even realize, or they might not even realize they're using sort of AI now. So I've ended up here. I described my career as a series of sort of happy accidents. And like I said, I did a talk a little while back here on kind of that journey. So I'm not going to go over that too much, but I've worked for a number of companies. So IBM, that's where I started doing AI professionally within IBM. And I was doing developer relations. So I was helping developers build on top of AI. So I was sort of teaching them stuff. Then worked for a company called Ripple, that some people may have heard of, that are a blockchain company. And that's when I moved here to Barbados, part of them, again, doing developer relations, DevRel, helping developers build in the sort of blockchain and Web3 space. And on to another few blockchain companies, Protocol Labs that built IPFS. If anybody's done any data science, they might have come across IPFS, it's a way of decentralized storage for large data. And Arbitrum, which is a layer 3 on top of the Ethereum blockchain network. Layer 2, and then Arbitrum Stylus and Arbitrum Orbit that lets you build layer 3 networks on top. So those sort of bits around sort of blockchain, and then I kind of came back more towards AI, and also started working with GovTech. I had an initial contract for 3 months with GovTech, helping sort of bootstrap that process. So if you go to alpha.gov.bb, that is what I was helping working on. And there's other people here in the room, Shannon, for example, who is working with GovTech. I'm actually no longer at GovTech. There's a slight mistake in the if you see some of the title slides for this talk, it says I'm at GovTech, but my contract finished there a little while back. But anyway, so GovTech is around making citizen services more easily accessible online. As Isaiah said earlier, so that you don't have to necessarily go down to the registration office and stand there and get something filled in, bring in paperwork, go back, bring in more paperwork, etc., etc. To try and optimize that where possible. So I suffer from imposter syndrome, right? I've had this feeling, as I'm sure many of us have, at times in which you think, well, why am I working on this? Why should people be listening to me? What am I doing here? I don't know what I'm doing. You're sat there and somebody else is telling you to do something. Yeah, I'll do that. You start doing it. You're like, I hope they don't realize I don't quite know what I'm doing. The good news is AI is moving so fast that nobody really knows what they're doing. We're all sort of building on this as we go along, learning as we're going on. Things are moving so incredibly quickly in this phase. So my urge to you is to experiment, to play, to build stuff, build out in the open. That's what I was doing. This screenshot is actually from a streaming session when I was at IBM. I started live streaming on Twitch, live streaming coding. So I would actually bring code up and sort of go through and say, okay, here's how we build a neural network in AI. Things have moved on to a much higher level of abstraction now. People are not the majority of people are not sort of building neural networks sort of on their own. But yeah, that's what I was working on. And then I started building more stuff in public. So there's a number of live systems that I've built that are out there at the moment. You can see, so You Getting True, which is a shopping site, searches about 350,000 products across Barbados. No matter what you're looking for, whether it's a water bottle or a laptop or a handbag or a phone or a dress or shoes, whatever it is, you can probably find it on there. We Outside, which is a search site for, or a aggregator of events going on. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about these later, but it allows you to go on there and see all of the FETs and the limes and the cruises and everything coming up. And You Hear Them, which is a search for parliamentary information. So all of the transcripts, whenever Parliament and the Senate sit, they have these, big, long, 4-hour-long sessions. Well, general, ordinary people are going to sit down there and listen to 4 hours of yada, 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 yada to get to the point that they want, right? So this allows you to search directly to it. All three of these were built with AI, right? Predominantly built with AI. I mean, I will go as far as saying that I probably did not, I can probably count the number of lines of code that I wrote by hand, on one hand, right? The vast majorities of these were built using AI tools, specifically a tool called Open Code that I'll talk a bit about later. But this is just to kind of show you that this stuff is real. So like I said, tools versus capabilities. The title of this is Tools That You Can Go Ahead and Use. I want to slightly reframe it more towards capabilities that you can use so that you can work with whatever the latest tool is that comes out tomorrow. By the time we walk out of this room, there will be another tool that comes out there that can do another part of AI. So really what I want to do is talk sort of more general about the areas that these tools work in. And in this talk, by the way, I think it's scheduled for about an hour of talk and then about 40 minutes of sort of more hands-on stuff. We'll see how we go schedule-wise. I'm pretty flexible with this, so we'll see how we go there. But we can certainly have questions and answers kind of as we go along there. But the point being is that tools change, but the capabilities endure. The tools change, like I said, it's not even, we're talking months, we're talking weeks, we're talking days. Some new tool comes out to take over the previous ones, especially in terms of sort of capabilities that some of these AI, especially what's called the large language models, the LLMs, your GPTs, Claudes, Geminis, DeepSeek, all of those, the speed at which they are improving is just absolutely staggering. There was a new model released by one of the Chinese groups, Quen. When was Quen 3.5? Like 3 days ago, I think it came out, Isaiah. You were playing around with it recently, about 3 days ago. And suddenly this is a model that you can actually capably run on still a fairly high-spec laptop, but you can actually capably run on a laptop rather than a data center full of servers, right? And this is only improving and only getting better. So whilst a lot of people might say, well, that's fine, but I can't afford a $4,000 laptop or whatever, which is where we are at the moment with this, well, in another 6 months, that's going to be a $2,000 laptop. Another 6 months, that's going to be a $1,000 laptop. Another 6 months from that, that's going to be running on your phone. Again, yesterday, I think it was yesterday, Apple released a toolkit for you to be able to write software in Python to access the models that run on an iPhone on hardware there. So that is like another massive jump there of being able to open up and use the hardware models running on some of these phones, which gives you, again, another leap in capabilities. So the tools change, but the capabilities endure, the patterns, keep going, the patterns survive going on. So I want to talk about kind of operating layers with this. So I've been talking a bit about the sort of the context of this. Now let's talk about the sort of the mental model kind of going forward. So what is changing? So the way in which people are working is significantly changing because the balance of effort in certain things is changing. Drafts and prototypes are cheap. I will show you the shopping site I was talking about. The prototype of that, I literally sit down and built in a weekend, right? Because I had an itch to scratch. I was trying to find, I can't remember what it was, a table saw, went onto Koyman's website, searched for a table saw. Koyman's website comes back and goes, oh, you want Gorilla Glue? I'm like, I want to cut things in half, not stick them together. And I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And I built a prototype that searched Koyman, Do It Best, etc., within the space of a few days to test out the idea. Now, that is not something I would have done if I had to have sat down and worked on it, for weeks or months in order to get to that validation stage. I was able to build it, test it. A few people said it was useful. So I was like, okay. I then went off. I was then doing the work with GovTech for a while. And then when that finished, I then went back to the idea and I was like, okay, let's expand this beyond the 4 stores that I'm currently searching and see if we can make this general to search as many stores as possible. And so the work that was done, I did myself solo using AI, helping coding it in a month. I think I calculated would have been about a year and a half of effort for a single person to do manually. So that year and a half got condensed down to a month. And this, again, is not just so much about, oh, look, we can do things faster, but what does that enable? It enables you to experiment faster, to fail faster, to succeed faster, right? You can test something. If you've just got some random idea beforehand, that random idea will be like, oh, now I need a team of developers to do it. Now I need to write out a spec, and now I need to test this out or whatever. Whereas now it's a case of you can come up with an idea and go, oh, that's an interesting idea. I wonder if I can build that. And you can build that much more rapidly. I had an idea for an app that would interview you using AI, right? I have this big problem of starting with a blank piece of paper, right? If I've got to write something and I start with a blank piece of paper, I just can't get going. So I thought, okay, well, what if I could use AI to interview me about something? So I would tell it a topic and I'd say, I don't know, I want to write a blog post about sailing, for example. And then the AI will go, oh, okay, well, what do you know about sailing? What got you into sailing? Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that topic. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, tell me more about this. And I actually built something within the space of about an hour to test that out. And that was using real-time voice as well, backwards and forwards. So this wasn't me typing, this was me talking. Because I had this idea, okay, what could happen if I could set this going, put my phone in my pocket, had my AirPods in or whatever, and take the dog for a walk, and continue this interview. So while it's talking to me, and I'm out there sort of in nature, kind of like not constrained by a desk, does that enable me to think a bit more freely and be a bit more creative, and then have it capture all of that and then summarize it for me to then write a blog post or a presentation or whatever it might be. And like I said, that was a random idea I had, and within the space of an hour, I then had that I could test out and say, oh yeah, that works. And I showed it to a few people and they're like, hey, that's really cool. Can I use that? So that's the thing, is it's about changing the balance of the effort. And I think that affects things like, do I experiment with this idea? Because beforehand, that experimentation would have been too expensive in terms of your time and effort to do, whereas now you can. When I built You Getting True, originally it used one particular database. It used MongoDB, MongoDB Atlas, and I then wanted to switch over to Postgres and host Postgres locally because I was using Postgres on some other things as well. And I literally said, okay, so I said to open code, I want to convert this entirely from MongoDB to Postgres. That's a pretty major sort of architectural change. And it went through, did it. And about half an hour later, it was like, here you go, here's it running. I had to do a few more iterations and refinement. And I was able to test it and go, okay, actually that works. This is, faster than what I had with MongoDB. This particular feature that I thought I needed, I don't need. This particular feature I was worried might not be there, is there. It seems to work fine. The amount of data that it's storing on disk seems to be good. It's going to make it cheaper, et cetera, et cetera. So I was able to test that very quickly and without fear of it, what if it fails? So if I do it and it's like, no, that doesn't work. Okay, throw it away. I've wasted half an hour of my time, not 3 weeks of re-architecting a whole system, right? So you can be a lot bolder in how you approach these things, how you experiment, how you refactor, how you change things. So now really the bottleneck, and automation. Automation is a very big thing about automating processes that you might do. And I'll show you a bit towards the end the process I automated for bringing on new stores into You Getting True. So that was a very manual process. I'd find a new store, look on their website, find, okay, well, what shop software are they using? What do the pages look like? How many products do they have, et cetera, et cetera. And I've now been able to automate that, so I can just give it a website address and it goes away, finds it, comes back, and goes, yes, we should add this site, or no, we shouldn't add this site because of this particular thing or this particular thing. So certain things that might be very manual at the moment and now possible to automate, again, it changes the balance of that cost, right? No doubt here everybody's done something in which you're doing something, you're doing it manually, like, would it be quicker to try and write a script to do this, or do I do it manually? And it's just, and you're on that sort of borderline bit, and you're like, oh, I'll just do it manually and copy and paste and copy and paste and copy and paste and copy and paste, because by the time I've written something for it, this one-off task, it's, you know, there's no point in me doing that. Whereas with, again, some of these AI tools, that balance changes. So you can write software for one specific task fairly quickly, right? So that helps with things like any sort of automation. So the bottleneck really lies now in well, what do you want to do, right? Your intent, verifying it, you know, making sure that it is doing what you want it to do, kind of going forward. So I mentioned at the start about tasks, not jobs. And I think this is a thing to sort of focus on, is what are the tasks that are being achieved or need to be achieved, not necessarily what is the job or what is the job title. Because I think the job title may change, but still there's certain tasks that need to be done, and you may be able to do them slightly differently or more efficiently or faster or better, whatever, using some of these AI tools, right? So certain things like reformatting certain data or summarizing data, or drafting initial ideas. These sort of things can happen like a lot quicker before you then have to get into the sort of more manual part of that. But still, things like value judgment, whether this thing should actually be done, you know, what do we need to do? Aspects of things like taste, for example, are still very much a human thing. You know, does this look right? Does this work right? Are people going to actually use it in the way that they work? You know, does this, you know, for want of a better word, does this smell right? You know, in what you've built, does this pass the sort of sniff test? That is still very much a human element, and I'd say that's still very much where humans are needed in the loop here for this. But like I said, don't sort of like be caught up with, okay, AI is going to replace my role, but look at, okay, what is my workflow? What is the tasks that I do, and how can I use AI to better improve them or do them in a slightly different way for that. So what I'm going to talk about is what I'm sort of like think of as kind of like the capability stack of AI, because I think a lot of people here, well, actually, let's find out here. Who would say they use AI, like actively uses AI on a daily basis? Put your hands up. Okay. Pretty much the entire audience. I'm speaking to the choir here a little bit, perhaps. Okay, so people use AI a lot. How many people here use it just to kind of help them brainstorm or think through something or analyze like some text or something like that? You know, kind of put your hands up. Okay, about just over half the room here. Okay, how many people use AI to actually analyze something visually or some audio? To analyze, right, one person, two people, three people, okay, a few people here. So that's what I would then say is one of the sort of next part of the stack. So sort of thinking about stuff and helping AI to help you sort of analyze and think about something. And then actually using the multimodal capabilities, and I'll go on to a little bit of that, about vision, about images, about audio, and using AI in that way to analyze audio. Maybe it's a case of critiquing something that has been done, or summarizing something, looking at a video or audio and getting it to summarize it much quicker. And then building. So building, who here has used AI for building software, using something like Claude Code, Open Code? Okay, then probably just under half the room here. So this is using tools to actually help build the code and in various levels, either acting as a sort of a partner to you, or actually writing the code, verifying the code. A lot of people are like, well, AI can make mistakes. Yes, AI can make mistakes and often does. Humans also make mistakes. One of the things I would suggest is using AI, using multiple different large language models to actually critique each other. So write a bit of code, use one particular model, switch to another model, say, hey, find the flaws in this. Where has that other model gone wrong? Challenge it. One of the things you'll find is a lot of these large language models are very much sort of people pleasers. You know, many of you will have seen the meme. You know, you ask ChatGPT something and it says, oh, that's a fantastic idea, brilliant, you're the best, go ahead with it, right? And you're like, is it really, right? So a good trick is to turn that around and actually say to something like ChatGPT, or do it in ChatGPT and then take it and put it in Claude or Gemini, DeepSeek, whatever, and say, okay, find the flaws in this, right? Where does this go wrong? How could this be better? What is missing from this, right? And ask it to critique it, because then you're kind of using AI sort of, for want of a better word, like against itself, right? You're using it to critique itself and build and iterate. And that is one of the things to kind of mention here. A lot of people, maybe not so much in this room, but a lot of people use AI as just a glorified Google, right? Just tell me, you know, who is the president of such and such a country, or what is the population of such, or whatever it might be. But really the value is actually the iterative process by which you can discuss stuff with AI, because it has a context there. You can actually bounce ideas off, you can go through, you can refine things as you go along. So I think I've actually slightly got ahead of myself here. Yeah, the thinking loop. So ask for something, then look at constraining it, iterating it, and critiquing it. So you probably can't see down here, but a prompt here. A friend wants to start a small Jamaican food stall. They're Jamaican, have previously worked and run a taco stand. The old taco stand unit is coming up for rent. Blah, 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 blah. I'm urging her to keep it simple. I want you to help us put together a business plan and a budget, right? And so this is ChatGPT. It's gone away, concept, positioning, pricing, et cetera, et cetera. Then on the right is a bit further down, the conversation, which I've said to it, you know, drinks are typically $6 Barbados here for a juice, for a bottle of juice. You know, factor that in, because I think it'd come up with a slightly different price. Anyway, that's just parts of that conversation. But this was something that was iterated on and iterated on and iterated on to come up with an idea. So he started off with a general kind of concept and then looked to kind of constrain it. So, you know, I want to build this or make this or write about this. Start with something quite general, and then from that then constrain it and say, okay, that's great, but I want to focus on this particular area or this particular topic. Iterate on it, and then, like I said, critique it. Often it's best to even get a different AI to then critique it, or you can ask it to critique it itself. Say, okay, that's great. What are the flaws in your reasoning? Where does this not work? Tell me how this would break, and then get it to refine itself from there. So that's kind of like the thinking loop. Yeah. Does it make a difference whether you use the free model of ChatGPT versus Pro? So in ChatGPT's specific case, so there's two slightly different things there, just to not confuse them. There's different plans that you can get with ChatGPT that are cost-based. So there's a free plan, there's a, I think, plus plan, and then a pro plan that's kind of like $0, $50 a month, $200 a month, something like that. And that's basically just mainly gives you different amounts of usage of the models. And then within ChatGPT, they have ChatGPT. They've got one of the models is called, say, GPT 5.2. I think it's 5.2 Pro, right? And that is a much more capable model in terms of its reasoning. It's also a lot more expensive to use. Now, they might not indicate that specifically within a coding plan, but if you're paying per token, ChatGPT Pro is something like, I can't remember what it is now, it's like $150 per million tokens. Whereas a regular ChatGPT, 5.2 is I don't know, $3 per million tokens or something like that. So some of the Pro models are like a lot more expensive. But that's, like I said, just be aware both in ChatGPT and things like Gemini. So Gemini has Google has Google Gemini 3 Flash, Google Gemini 3 Pro. they've got a flash light model, and they have different capabilities and different costs with them. So your question is which is best to use? You've got to slightly make a value judgment on that. A lot of people will say, okay, we use the more capable models to plan something, and then the cheaper models to actually execute it. So especially if you're doing something like coding, you might say, okay, I'm going to use ChatGPT 5.2 Codex, which is a fairly capable model, to plan out this thing and come up with a plan as to what we need to actually build. And then I'm going to use one of the free models to then actually execute that, right? Yes, yeah. Now, there's two kind of approaches to this. One is, some people say use like the most capable model, which typically is the most expensive model, to test the thing and see if it works, and then kind of work your way cheaper until it no longer works, if you see what I mean. So say you're trying to, write something that's like, okay, summarize, and I'll show you a bit, summarize this parliamentary transcript. So you might start with a more capable model and see how that does and use that as a reference. You're like, okay, if I had unlimited funds, this is the quality I could get. But I live in the real world, I don't have unlimited funds. So let's drop down a couple of models and try and see with the cheaper models and see how they compare with it as well. And I'll talk a bit specifics about where I've done that in a bit. Yeah. So then I mentioned kind of like the next stack after the thinking is sort of seeing or hearing multimodal data. So images, videos, audio, rather than just textual information. I use Google Gemini a lot for this because it's very, very good at that kind of information. And Google Gemini can actually directly access YouTube as well because it's Google as well. So you can actually give Google Gemini a YouTube URL and say, hey, look, just go and analyze this YouTube URL and give me a summary, rather than have to download a video and then upload that video as well. So it's faster in terms of things like bandwidth and that. But yeah, AI can read PDFs, screenshots, video, audio. There's a whole lot you can do there, right? You can get it to build something and then take a screenshot of it and say, okay, I need this bit changing, or this bit doesn't look right. Or, I mean, what I've done in the past is I've actually taken a recording of what I have done. So I'm recording this talk now. On a previous talk, I took that whole video recording, I gave it to Gemini, I said, okay, what do you think of this? How did I do? Right? And it's kind of gone through and said, okay, that's quite good, but this bit of your message wasn't that clear, or this bit could have been stronger, or that bit was good. And I go, okay, right, so next time I need to focus on this, right? So you can actually use it as a kind of a reference, critiquing your own work, for example. So let's look at what this looks like in reality. So I created a site called You Hear Them. You Hear Them is a site that allows you to search parliamentary transcripts. It's live at the moment, youheardem.com. You can go on there, and it allows you to say, okay, what is the state of funding in schools? And it will come back and say, okay, well, on this particular date, this was debated by these people, and this is what they said. And here's this legislation as well. And on page 8, it mentions this particular topic about funding in schools. So how did I create that? So starting off originally, you probably know that YouTube has transcripts built in. You can click on the description. They hide it away a little bit now, but you click on description, click on transcript, and it'll come up with a transcript. And that transcript is an audio transcript of the data. So originally, the first version of this, I actually built it for a hackathon in conjunction with my eldest daughter. We worked on it together as a kind of a learning exercise. And it would take those transcripts and it started to build this sort of knowledge base that you could search through, right? But there was a couple of problems with that. One, take this example, how do you spell Thorn? As in Mr. Ralph Thorn, how do you spell Thorn? It's got an E on the end, right? If I say Thorn to you, do you know whether it's got an E on the end? No, you don't. So YouTube, when it listens and it hears Ralph Thorn, it doesn't know how to spell that. Minister Reed, Minister for Innovation, Jonathan Reed. Does Jonathan have an H in it? Does Reed have an EI in it? Or how is it spelled, right? So the first version of it, one, was spelling everybody's names wrong. And two, if you think about parliamentary process and the language they use, you know, I don't refer to Mr. Shannon Clark. I refer to the Right Honourable Member for wherever he lives, right? Not yet. Working on it. So how does an audio transcript know if I say the Right Honourable from St. James North, how does it know that that is that particular parliamentarian, right? It needs context for that. So the second version of this that I built, which I launched just the time of the election just passed, I took it differently. I realized that on the screen, there's titles. And in this case, Mr. Ralph Thorne's name is on the screen. So if you're just listening to the audio, you don't see that. But if you're also looking at the video and the images of the video, you do. So using Google's Gemini model, I was able to actually pass it the YouTube URL and say, look through this video and transcribe it, right? And what we have here is a section of transcriptions here. So the start, so at 45 seconds in, order was said by the Speaker of the House, right? All right, blah, 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 seating is resumed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right, Speaker of the House, Mr. Ralph Thorne, I'm obliged to you, sir, right? So it's got the text in there as it was said and the timestamps at which it was said. It's also able to look at the screen. So I'm telling it to look and see, and I've explicitly said in the prompt, there are titles on the screen, look to them for the name of the person. Yeah. Yes. Yes, it did, because as you can see here, it says Mr. Ralph Thorne on there. So whereas instead, when they were speaking, they would refer to the leader of the opposition, for example, as his title, but on the screen, they actually had his name, so it would actually read that. Right. Good question. Right. So the question is, what happens when somebody else starts speaking, say they interject or whatever within the conversation, but the title doesn't update because it's still, you know, that speaker's time and they're still on the screen, but somebody else is just responding to a point, for example. How does it deal with that? Well, it builds up context as it goes along. And with a bit of luck, that person does actually present something at the time and does actually, their name does come up at some point, and it's able to then associate that with their voice, right? So it is actually analyzing the voice characteristics as well. But I actually went a step further. You have order papers. So before each session, there's a PDF document that is the agenda. It is the order paper. And it says, okay, the speakers for this session will be this person, this person, this person, this person. This is their title. This is their constituency. These are the bills that are going to be discussed. Because remember, parliamentary sessions have a specific structure to them. A bill comes in, is debated, you know, once, twice, and there goes to Senate, is then debated there, then comes back again, finally is approved, etc., right? So there's a set format. So what I did in this new version was I actually passed in the PDF as well. So it looks for the PDFs, finds them by date, looks at the YouTube videos, looks at the title of the YouTube video. Okay, this is the 122nd sitting of the Honourable House of Parliament, or whatever it says, looks at the PDF, finds the one that matches that, passes the PDF in as context at the start, so it has the spellings, it knows who's going to be talking, it knows what's going to be debated. So it has a little bit of background context. So when somebody stands up and suddenly starts talking about something, it may have a better chance of finding out who it is, right? Now, one problem we had is these sessions are 4 hours long. And large language models, just like us humans, get bored. And they tune out after a while, right? And it's kind of like, you know, 1, 2, skip a few, 99, 100, right? It's kind of, you look at the transcript, it starts off all going, you're like, oh yeah, this is going well, this is going well, this is going, oh, wait, what? There's a 3-hour break in the middle. And now we're done, you know, all leave. You're like, okay, right. So what I actually had to do was get it to work in segments. So it works in this case in think it's half hour or 20 minute, I can't remember what I settled on in the end, segments, but it has to overlap those segments slightly because you don't want to cut off mid-sentence because then you lose the context of what somebody was saying. So you have to slightly overlap those segments, but then you need to make sure that you then deduplicate, what is overlapped in the final output, right? You need to make sure that it's like, if you say one thing at the end of one segment and then you restart again and that is then said at the start of the next segment, that it realizes that that is the same thing, right? Yes.
It sounds to me that you have a sense of the AI's capabilities.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess my question is, innovate, how do you stay up to date, one, with capabilities that are present and that are emergent? And perhaps even more significantly, how do you have this sense that allows you to take full advantage of the AI's potential, what it actually could be?
Okay, so so the question is about how do I know what the capabilities of the different AIs are and how do I get a sense for which ones to use in which case and which thing. It's kind of a manual process. You just got to keep up to date with the use and try them out. A lot of them have like free trials you can use and give them a go, but you've really got to work through them all. Now I've mainly focused on, for the production stuff that I do, a few like Google Gemini, GPT, and it's specifically their open source model, GPT OSS 120B, that I use as well. But some of them have multimodal capabilities, some of them don't. Some of them have longer context windows, so could take more information in at once. Some are shorter. So it really is a case of you've got to like experiment and try with them and see. Another big aspect is cost, because unfortunately we live in the real world here, right? And sometimes you might find a really great model at something, but it's just too expensive for you to use, right? So you've got to then look for cheaper alternatives. Or you might find this model is free for now, whilst it's in preview, and then now it's gone into production, now we're going to start charging for it. Or you might find the opposite, that you're using Gemini 2.5 or 2.0, then Gemini 3 comes out, and 2.5 and 2.0 become cheaper, right? So you might then look back at them. Actually, the original version of this was using a preview of Gemini 2.5 Flash or something, I can't remember which it was. And then because I was using the preview version, which is like the cutting edge version, they then discontinued that in favor of like the longer term supported ones, and suddenly it all stopped working, right? And I had to then go through and change it. And certain things have different, I don't know how to describe it, almost like different personalities, shall we say, in how well they can respond to something. So one example is I built a tool called Tali, and Tali is a specifically ADHD aware task tracker. It lives in WhatsApp, and you can just communicate with it with WhatsApp. You send it a message, hey, I need to do this. And it's like, okay, cool, I'll remind you to do that, or I need to do that. Now, I was using Gemini 3 Flash when that came out. It's still in preview. And I was like, okay, well, let's try and use a cheaper model. So I used one of GPT ones, the GPT OSS 120B, which is a very fast open source model and a lot cheaper. And I used that, and it lost its personality. And I can't really quantify that. I can't really test that in any specific automated way, right? It just felt wrong. The first version was like, wow, this is, I'm really sort of talking to something that is seemingly intelligent here, and having a real conversation. And then I tried the other model. I'm like, no, I'm now back to talking to a robot, right? And this just doesn't feel right. So some of the times you really do need to test it. Now there are automated, there's what are called evals that you can do that sort of test things like the precision and recall, and you will see a number of tests come out. So every time a new model comes out, they run it against a bunch of benchmarks, and they'll be like, okay, this has scored 78% in this, there's one called World's Last Exam, right? Which is like, okay, here's a reasoning exam, or here's a coding exam, or whatever. So, and there's a little bit of like showmanship, I think, between the different models, and it's like one comes out, okay, we got 78%, the next one comes out, well, we got 79%, and sometimes maybe you think, maybe are they just trying to fit for that particular case? You'll find, and unfortunately I don't think there's any real way I can say other than play around with them until you find one that seems to suit what it is you're doing. Right? The high-level characteristics will be described. This one can do images, this one can't, or this one has this context length, or this one isn't, or this one's going to cost you $150, and this one will cost you $3. But
it feels like that's an opportunity, because I can almost imagine that some way of creating an experience that
right.
gives you snippets of upper potential.
Yes.
So almost like with XR immersion, where you can begin to see an experimentation where people are playing and capabilities that you haven't dreamed of that are both frontier and practical.
Yeah.
So that feels like an opportunity.
Yeah. That could be something like that. Would be really good. Some way of being able to better, not, I don't even say visualize, experience, I suppose is a better way to experience them. Yeah. Yeah. Now I'll show you again when I say the tools at the end. I'll show you a few things, sort of ways in which I go about that, sort of playing around with that. But anyway, like I said, this is kind of an example here of tooling. So this is I can actually I've actually got a little bit more on this one. I think. Oh, it might be on a little bit later on. Then I mentioned about things like sort of coding. So one of the things it does is it allows you, like I say, kind of compress the loop, right? You have this sort of coding loop in which you kind of think of something, you build something, you test something, you release something maybe, and that sort of process can take quite a long time. And with AI, some of these AI tools, things like I mentioned, open code. People here probably heard of Claude Code, which is a very popular, or Codex. Open Code is a project that allows you to more easily use multiple different AIs with writing code, and it allows you to, like I said, to kind of compress this loop down and make it much faster. Now, there's still, within coding, there's still engineering discipline needed here, and there's certain things that will certainly help. So testing, for example, making sure you have tests in place. But again, you can have the AI write a lot of the tests. Now, sometimes you might say, well, isn't this the AI kind of marking its own homework? Yes, use a different AI, switch between them. Where it might miss things, I think in many ways it makes up for just the fact of the reality is you probably wouldn't have written those tests in the first place if you were doing it manually, be honest, right? So, you can now get a much higher test coverage. Even if it's not quite perfect, you might look in there and say, okay, it's not quite perfect. It's certainly a lot better than the tests that you didn't write, right? So, and that helps the AI as well when it's going through the coding, because if it is instructed to run the tests, now you can have those tests as, say, a Git pre-commit hook and say, okay, before you commit this code, you have to make sure the test suite passes. And so when it goes and writes some code, it will run the test. Oh, this test broke. It'll then go and look at the test, look at the code, say, oh, I need to fix this because I've given a wrong parameter type into this function, for example, or whatever it might be, and fix that. So putting things in there like unit tests, things like linters as well. So automatic code quality checks are also very, very good, because those sort of things are more deterministic. So a code quality check, a linter that you run, will give you the same output. If you give it the same input, it will give you the same output. Whereas LLMs are more non-deterministic, and they will give you slightly varying outputs. When you combine the two, you can actually get something that's pretty powerful. And you use the linters and the unit tests as guardrails for the AI. So I mentioned this project You're Getting True. So this was allowing me to search through hardware stores. I wanted to buy a table saw, I think it was, and Koiman's website was like, hey, here's some glue. I'm like, no, I want to cut stuff in half, not join it together. Don't know why it comes back with Gorilla Glue when you search for table saw, but it does. So I built something, and then, like I said, I built a further version that took longer, but still, what would have taken me a year and a half took me about a month to build instead. And so this allows me to search through, so it's finding Do It Best, Marshalls, Carter's, Equip For You, Koiman. There's about 100 stores on there, and it's not just hardware now. Like I said, it's pretty much everything in there that you might want to buy. Basically, there's a store that has products on their website. then it will be able to find them and process them. Now, it's using AI in a lot of different ways in this case. So, and you'll probably, yeah, no, that's come out too blurry to be able to read there. There is a pipeline that the data goes through. There's a crawler that goes to the site and actually grabs the data from, say, Koiman or Massey or whatever's website. It stores the raw HTML. It stores screenshots and product images as well. It then uses one particular, so it uses 3 different AIs in this process, and it's using Gemini Flash Lite, which is what I used was out at the time, to categorize: is this page a product or is it a category of products? Right, because I'm just interested in the products themselves, not a whole page of categories. If it's a category, then we basically deprioritize it or add it to the end of the list. If it's an actual product, then we can actually look and see how we extract data from it. And I actually have a tool that will look at the data and actually build an extractor from a set of modular components and configure it as a profile and say, okay, the title is in this HTML element, the price is in Barbados dollars and is in this element. Goes through some normalization that happens with, like I said, data's in different places on different sites. Then there's an enrichment, well, there's an image processing URL, so that's using GPT-4 Mini, 4.0 Mini. So that's looking at the actual product image and describing it, right? So it's coming up with something and saying, okay, what is that thing that you are looking at, and describing it. Because the description might not say that, you know, that is a turquoise, you know, water, you know, bottle or something like that, right? It might just say it's a water bottle. So that helps describe it. So that then goes into the search. And there's an enrichment as well that kind of looks at all of the stuff and says, okay, is there any description about materials that are used or color or what specific brand is it? And kind of like tries to enrich the description based upon what it can find out. And all of that is then stored, uses a system called vector embedding to store it in a database to allow you to search for it, so that when you search for something, it can find the relevant things. And stored in Postgres. There's actually a federated search. So this search now searches products and it searches Instagram vendors. And on the back end, those are 2 separate processes running in parallel, and it aggregates the results. And it then uses GPT OSS 120B, which is a very fast open source model, to actually re-rank the results and tell you why they're chosen. So, as an example here, I searched for a 40-inch curtain pole, right? And what it's come up with is a curtain rod, not a curtain pole, a curtain rod. Those are the same thing, right? It's intelligent enough to work out and say, okay, you didn't use exactly the right wording, but I know what you mean. And it's in Carter's, and it tells you down here a match. Now, I searched for a 40-inch one, and it says adjustable, 28 to 48 inches. So that's suitable for 40 inches. Again, a regular search would say, well, you're looking for a 40-inch pole. I don't have a 40-inch pole, because 40 inches isn't mentioned anywhere in that description, right? But 28 to 48 inches is. And it's using, as you do the search, that's why if you've used You're Getting True, when you do a search, you'll see it comes up and it says, you know, searching for stuff. It takes a little time. It gives you a bit of a update as a process as to what it's doing. But it is in real time sending the data to an AI to actually analyze the candidate results and find the best ones and tell you why it thinks they're a good match and bring that back, right? We Outside 246. This is a site that aggregates FETs, limes, events going on. And the problem, again, this was an itch to scratch. I was here, I was looking, okay, I want to go on a cruise. What's going on? I want to go to a garden party or, you know, a FET or whatever. Now, unless all of these events are pretty much listed on Instagram, right? You'll see a poster there. So Bacchanal State of Mind, it's on MV Dream Chaser, Sunday, March 1st, right? That's on Instagram, but it's on Instagram as an image. The actual information is not even in the text there in this particular post, right? So, or some of it is, but not all of it. And so this site finds the Instagram post, looks at the poster and go, okay, is that a poster of, is this Instagram post a post of an event, and does it have a poster on it, as opposed to a post about a car crash that's happened on the highway, or something that's new things being opened or something like that, right? So it'll then actually look through the data. It'll give you reasoning as to why. So this poster name and branding match the existing Bacchanal State of Mind Cooler Backpack Cruise. So it's already got one event for this, and it's realized that this is the same. Explicitly states onboard MC Dream Chaser 2, which matches the master event location. This post adds and clarifies the DJ lineup, right? So, and it's got the artist there, the location, the type, confidence, the master poster ID to associate this with. And so this is pulling in all of this data. Again, this is using a combination of vision to do it, to read the actual poster. It's using a cheaper small model to do it a first pass, right? Because it was getting very expensive, throwing all of this at a very expensive model and saying, well, the model comes back and goes, well, that's a post about a cat stuck up a tree. That's, what do I care about that, right? And I've just burnt a bunch of tokens to find that out. Whereas I can use a cheaper model to basically analyze that and come back and say, no, that's not an event. Yes, please. Okay, so the question is, I've got multiple sites. How much does it cost to run each one? Differing amounts of, depending what they cost different amounts. I would say We Outside at the moment is probably costing about 40 US dollars a month, something like that. And the majority of that is actually not in the AI, it's actually in the third-party scraper that I'm having to use to access the data on Instagram, because Instagram doesn't have a public API for you to use. So I have to go via third party, and that charges me per request, per post that I see. So, I need to tune that and say, okay, check every day or don't check every day or whatever. Change that. Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, so it will find multiple posts for the same event and aggregate them together, right? So because what it does is it's basically an autonomous agent that moves around Instagram. So it'll find, okay, in this case, whatever, Salt, right? Salt has posted about this particular event. It's happening on the Dream Chaser 2. It'll then look at the Dream Chaser 2's Instagram account and go, well, there's another event happening on the Dream Chaser 2. There's Paranice coming up. So let's go and look at Paranice's account. Okay, well, Hutchie is doing something at Paranice. Now he's got Rosa that's coming up. So Rosa's another event, and Rosa's happening at the Botanical Gardens. So let's look at Botanical Gardens, right? So it kind of moves around accounts to find what it can. And it will find multiple events, the same event from multiple accounts will post it. And they'll put in, like you said, different, tier 1 sold out, tier 2 sold out, or this DJ is now turning up, or this DJ is. So it brings all of them and tries to associate them together. So in this case, you see it says matching the existing Bacchanal State of Mind Cooler Backpack Cruise. So for this particular one, it's realized there's already a poster for it and has associated them together. And then the question being is, which is the headline one that it should show on the site for you? And again, I've tried to get the AI to say, okay, show me the poster that has the most information on it, which is very subjective, but you have all the rest you can scroll through as well if you want. And it could update it. It gets a little bit tricky because suddenly you get somebody posting, okay, well, this event has now cancelled because of bad weather or something like that. Okay, should it update it? What if it gets that wrong? So I'm sort of erring on the side of sort of simplicity and saying, okay, here's all the information. You as a user can go and look at it. If you click on any of these, it'll take you to the Instagram post, take you to the account. Go and check and make sure it's all good before you get yourself all dressed up and head out there, right? So yeah, so this again is using several different AIs to actually process it depending upon what I'm trying to actually see on here. Yeah. Yeah.
when you were running this?
I can't remember. I think I had one. I have to double check and see. I think I did put one in there and say, check. But yeah, and again, this is one of the. I think from an end user point of view, one of the worst things that can happen in any kind of like search type system is when it comes back, it goes no results, right? Because it's looking too literally or too specifically for something. General human nature is we want to look broadly and then we want to kind of manually sort of filter down. That's generally how we work as humans. So, the worst example is you go and search on a site. There is a government price comparison website out there at the moment that if you go in and you search for white bread, it'll go, we don't have white bread. You're like, you're telling me that Massey don't sell white bread, right? You're telling me that Cost You Less don't sell white bread? Of course they do, right? But for whatever reason, it doesn't show up, probably because maybe it's described something differently. Maybe it's described as not white bread, but white loaf, or maybe it's described as, I don't know, farmhouse loaf or something. I don't know, whatever it is, right? But you as a user, you go in there and you go, well, what do you mean it's not there, right? And so then you think, okay, well, what else is it called? And you should have to come up with something. So what I found works best is to be able to bring back a broader set of results, even if it's slightly too broad. And then with You Getting True, I made sure it actually told you why it has brought this thing back, because that's the thing that often you're like, well, so for me, again, I searched Koyman's website for a table saw and it comes back with Gorilla Glue, right? Well, why? That makes no sense to me, right? But if it came back and said Gorilla Glue because of this reason, I can't think of a sensible reason why it would do that. But if it did, then I might be like, oh, okay, fair enough, right? There we go. So, and then kind of like the next area is really around kind of orchestration and agents. People have probably heard a lot about recently about things like a whole like Claw series of tools, OpenClaw, and that, which are people going out and buying specific like Mac Minis or setting up virtual machines to actually set up an agent that can access their WhatsApp and their email and basically be a personal assistant for them. And that's kind of like the next stage of sort of automation there. Now, some of that is a little bit sketchy at the moment, should I say? But it's certainly the direction where a lot of things are going, right? And as an example, here again, you possibly can't see this, but I can show you people later on. This is within OpenCode, and I've told it, research a new store called imagineit3dbb.com. And it's gone through then, it goes, the user wants me to research a new store, imagineit3dbb.com. This is a Caribbean store, barbadosdomain.bb, that needs to be added to the You Getting True product search engine. According to the agents.md file, right, which is the file that gives it its instructions, I should use the research store skill for this task. Let me load that skill and get the detailed instructions. So there's a file there that details how should it research the store. I now have the research store workflow. Let me start with phase one, running the research script for it. So it runs this Python script with that URL and comes back with a bunch of results there, right? And it's then going through, and the end result is it comes back at the end and goes, okay, this is a store. It uses Shopify. It has 53 products on it. It's mainly aimed at this. I can see it's got prices, it's got descriptions, it's got images. This seems like a good store to add. Do you want me to go ahead and add it? I go, yes. It goes, okay. It goes away. It then writes the configuration file for the scraper, which is a YAML configuration file that says the title is in this element, the description is here, constructs that, then extracts some sample products, tests it, again, using another LLM to test it and say, okay, did we get good results from this? Yes or no? If not, go back, maybe we need to refine it, boom, 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 boom. And at the end, take that file, commit it to GitHub, and tell me that it's done, right? So by the end of that, a couple of minutes later, either that store wasn't worth adding or it was worth adding, and it's created a whole profile for it, extraction, tested, added, committed, ready to go into production. The next time the crawler runs, it will then get that data from that store and add it, right? And that is automating a process that I was doing manually, right? Using OpenCode itself as the agent. So that's when I say I'm not going to mention tools too much. I've mentioned OpenCode a number of times. I really do love it. I really love it. There are other coding agents out there, coding systems out there. What's that?
I have a question for you. So
Yeah.
you say you use open code.
Yeah.
I've been experimenting with that. But sometimes does it still accept the Claude API keys?
I don't think they do. I don't think they do. So Anthropic cut them off. But there's a number within open code. You can access a number of different models as well. And they've got a thing called Open Code Zen that allows you some of the access to some of the open source free models. So there's one Min-Max 2.5, which is actually really, really good. GLM 4.7, which is again another really good one. Kimi K2, and a lot of these models you can get subscriptions for them as well, and a lot of them are a lot cheaper. But I know that OpenCode has, I think it's OpenCode Zen Lite or something, I think they've called it, which is like $10 a month, that gives you access to a lot of them directly via OpenCode themselves, give you access to these models. But some of them now are really, really, really good. I mean, I'm using Min-Max 2.5 as kind of like my daily driver for coding now, and that's an open source model on there, a lot cheaper than Claude. So I had a Claude Anthropic subscription, and I've let that lapse now because I'm just not using it enough now. So I still have my OpenAI. I've got the lowest tier OpenAI paid subscription, and that gives me access to GPT 5.2 Codex, which I use for like anything that's like really difficult. Then it tries that, but otherwise I use Min-Max 2.5 for most of it. So yes, right. So really, yeah, I want to say that, you know, sort of Barbados is kind of like I think of it as kind of like a proving ground for a lot of these ideas here within the context of us here in this room or what we're doing. We have the opportunity to kind of build stuff in a very compact civic environment, right? I mean, I was literally in Do It Best buying a new soldering iron because I somehow burnt my soldering iron out. I went in there, asked the lady, she said, yeah, okay, soldering iron's here, I'm doing this again. Have you got gas for it? Because it's a gas-powered one that I bought. And she's like, yeah, it's down there, get that. And I was just about to turn away, and she says, I like the website you do. She says, oh, yeah, I've been using them. She says, really, really, really good. You know, I like the one, you know, way outside. I was using that to find some events and stuff like that, right? So the fact that we are, you know, 166 square miles, 300,000 people, means that we can get this much more rapid feedback on ideas, right? It's much easier to kind of see problems that need solving locally, have a go at solving them, and get direct feedback from them. This is not, you know, if you're in the middle of Silicon Valley or whatever, then often it's a lot more of an abstract kind of concept, these things. You build some random thing, you may never even meet the users there, whereas, you know, I'll bump into the user, you know, going shopping or, you know, on the beach or whatever it might be, right? So I think that certainly helps. So I mentioned, like I said, that I wasn't specifically going to talk about tools, more about techniques, but I will mention a few tools that I've used here. So OpenCode, I've mentioned quite a bit already. OpenCode.ai, that is a really good tool, not just for coding. I use it for a lot of other stuff as well. So for a lot of my projects, I'll have a directory with the code in, and then I'll have another directory, like whatever it's called, -business, for example, that I have kind of like more sort of high-level business thinking in, sort of business plans, ideas, marketing information, that I don't want in the other repository because that's up on GitHub and maybe I want to make that public or sell that or whatever, but I don't necessarily want all of the thinking behind it. But I can tell that, hey, this project references this code in this other directory. You know, if you need to look something up, go look in there. But this is where the marketing materials are, the business plan, the idea behind it is, for example. So that's open code. ChatGPT, probably all use that. Everybody's used that. Still one of like the OG. What is really good is the deep research mode in there is great. So I've gone in there and I've said, okay, find me all businesses of this type in Barbados and give me their Instagram account. And it'll go away for an hour churning away and come back and go, here you go. Here's the ones we found and here's that. So that's great for that kind of like market research type stuff where you're like, hey, I want to build this thing. Are there any other products out there that have this capability? go and look for them for me. So ChatGPT, really good for market research. The deep research mode, you have a certain number of uses of that depending upon your plan, so don't squander them, but it is really, really good for that. Google AI Studio is a really good one for testing out any of the Google models, the Gemini models, because it allows you to select the model, select the reasoning levels, the temperature, all those kind of things there, and test stuff out. And it is, again, it's multimodal there. So just drop a YouTube link into it and say, summarize this YouTube URL, right? Or here's an image, tell me what's in the image, or whatever it might be. It's really good at that. So that's what I use a lot for just testing things out before I write some code about it. And here we've got LM Studio. LM Studio is a local bit. Yeah, Isaiah's very happy. He's a big fan of LM Studio. So LM Studio allows you to run models locally. Caveat, you need to have the hardware to do it, but the models are getting sort of smaller and smaller as we go along. The latest, like I mentioned, the Quen 3.5 model that they've got there is actually something you can, run at a reasonable speed on still a fairly high spec laptop, but a laptop that, still, although it does get a little warm, but that's pretty good as well. But LM Studio can access a lot of other different models and things like that, and things like MCP tooling as well. You can configure in there, so you can create an MCP tool. So I wanted to analyze some of my finances, and I was like, well, LLMs are not really good at adding up numbers together. They're a bit too, non-deterministic for that kind of stuff. So I actually had OpenCode write me a very simple accounting ledger and expose it as an MCP tool, and then connected that up into LM Studio. I said, okay, here's a PDF of my statements for the last 6 months. Go look through them, get all the transactions, and then use the MCP tool to add them into the accounting ledger, and then the accounting ledger has got a tool that says, give me the totals and this, that, and the other. So you kind of got the combination of deterministic and non-deterministic kind of working together there quite well. But again, that was all running entirely locally. So I was using a local model and local data put on there. So I wasn't sending my bank statements off to one of the cloud models, for example. I was doing that all locally with that. So I think that is it in terms of general sort of talking. We've got some time to sort of do more questions and sort of more in-depth demos. I mean, if there's anything that people want to talk about or see, then I can kind of show some more demos of that. Yeah.
This goes on the line of not really replacement, as you were saying. So a person may have, for example, familiarize themselves with SQL, for example.
Yeah.
And now reach a stage where a company could use AI to create a database.
Yep.
Run all the SQL queries. Then it leaves a person asking themselves, okay, I did this data analyst. Okay, I can use SQL.
Yeah.
But now, I guess it's like from now how to, as you said, more like workflow mentality.
Yeah.
That the AI may not replace you, but what task now can you offload to AI to just make you more efficient, so the company more attractive to the company? Like, yes, the AI can do the SQL, but we still need this guy to do A, B, and C.
Right. Yeah. So you can still use your knowledge of SQL and the certification you got and the experience you have to definitely cross-check that, because you don't want that to be wrong, right? Because that can have some pretty significant implications. And also sometimes the AIs will go off on a bit of a random, tangent sometimes, and you're like, no, I didn't mean that at all. I need it to be like this. So it is I think a partnership. It is a bit of both, but it certainly helps you speed things up. Like, for example, I moved some of these from Google Cloud, these projects, to run on my own virtual private servers I had hosted with Hetzner. And I literally set up the server, like create the new server, give it an SSH key, and I said to OpenCode, look, there's an SSH key configured for this server at this address. Go to the server and set it all up for me, right? And it went away, and it's like, okay, so you need Postgres, you need this. Oh, this dependency is missing, so I'll install this. Oh, this. And I'm like, okay, now create a user for this. Now create a blue-green deployment system that can allow me to deploy and roll over between different versions. Create a GitHub user and set it up so that GitHub can, when I commit to GitHub, it has a GitHub action that then deploys. So all that kind of stuff. And that's, I mean, I feel fairly confident in letting it do that on the basis of I can sanity check it because I do know how to do that. But I can do that and go and grab a sandwich while it's doing that, right? Or go and work on some other task while it's doing that and come back and it's done it. Whereas if I did it manually, it would take me half a day to do that manually, right? So I can now be working on something more specific in that regards. But it certainly, I mean, what I found is I've got several different projects all going on at once. And because the coding is no longer the bottleneck now becomes my imagination and my brain in this. And it's exhausting. I tell you, it's exhausting. Suddenly everything moves so fast. You're like, and it's like, right, done. And you're like, oh, okay. What should we do now? What should we do now, right? And you're kind of going through this. So, and because, okay, I'm waiting for this to complete, so I've got something else going at the same time. So I'll have effectively 3 different projects on the go at the same time, working in parallel. And, you know, my brain isn't quite as good as that at doing all parallel stuff as computers are, right? So, but yeah.
Yeah. Any advice on how you cope with that kind of speed within teams? Like you're trying to manage your team, and the team around you is that light speed, and you're trying to create strategic direction, and all this information is coming at you. And what would you suggest?
I don't have a definitive answer. I've definitely experienced that, and it is something that. Right. Yeah. I mean, for me, my team now is AI. It's me and a bunch of AI agents, right? But when you've got, you know, a team of real people, it can definitely highlight any issues, and if there's sort of any pre-existing issues, then it can sometimes, you know, exacerbate them because suddenly you have one person moving 10 times faster than somebody else. And I mentioned the whole bit about the experimentation side of things. Sometimes that can be misconstrued as well. Be like, right, hey, I've had this idea, boom, 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 I've got it. And somebody will be like, well, wait a minute, we didn't agree to do that. Where are you going with that? Where are you going with that? I'm like, well, I don't know yet. I'm just testing it out, right? So, or management suddenly sees it and goes, oh, that was quick. Here you go, now do that, right? You know, oh, you got that done in 5 minutes? Well, that means that, you know, the entire project can launch by lunchtime, right? And you're like, not quite, right? So I think there's a bit around expectations. There's a bit about like differences between the speed, and you'll suddenly find, well, then different parts of the organization and roles move at different speed. How fast now does marketing move compared to development, right? Because now you're suddenly finding, well, wait a minute, I can write this code really quick, I can build this product really quick, but can I market it, right? How fast does the marketing need to go? Can I even do the marketing? Well, maybe I can get some of the AI to help me with it. I do, right? But suddenly it might be a case of, okay, well, that's fine because we can spend 3 weeks, you know, setting out this marketing plan because it's going to take us 3 weeks to do the development. Suddenly the development now takes a day, and suddenly you're like, well, wait a minute, well, we've completed that, but we haven't worked out how we're going to market it yet, right? So you'll start to find, I think the problems are not so much the absolute speed, but the relative difference in speed between different parts of the organization that suddenly becomes apparent in there. How we solve that, I don't actually, I don't know. I mean, this is changing radically how organizations work, what even an organization looks like, right? I mean, some of these things here, if I was building a year or two ago, it would be like, okay, right, I could do this prototype. Now I need to get funding to go and do it. So now I need to go to a venture capitalist or Silicon Valley or a bank or whatever and do that and get that funding and go through all these discussions of find some funding and then build a team and now da-da-da. Whereas now it's like, well, I can build this on my own. So I possibly don't need that level of funding or that type of funding or that funding at this particular point in time. So what does that now mean? Because I'm now filling in like application forms and they're like, well, tell us about your team. It's like, well, me and that, right? So, and a lot of venture capitalists are like, well, we want to see what the team, who's on the team. And it's like, well, that model doesn't really work now, right? So I think it's changing as well, the way in which teams, companies, businesses, organizations are actually structured. And that may well knock on to the whole topic of this, which is, you know, are people going to be replaced? I think there's going to be a lot of restructuring that may happen, right? Because suddenly they're finding, okay, well, we had 10 people doing this and 5 people doing this, and now we need to swap it around, right? Or now we need fewer people there or more people there because this bit's now going faster, which means we need more people now to deal with that side of things, right? If I can build a product that much quicker, I now need a bigger sales team to go out and sell the product, perhaps, right? So, yeah. Any other questions or? Yeah. No.
I already explained a lot of this stuff. So
Yeah.
I guess I could talk a bit about what you're doing.
Yeah.
That would be fun. So you said having an AI team. I ran my own Kubernetes lab, and I started training with orchestration agents to monitor certain processes, culture up, deployments, or done properly. So the amount of creativity, you can really do a lot of different things that you might have thought not possible.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, setting up is, give that extra key, tell it what you want to be on the server, and it goes and it really does. So it kind of gives you back time. Like sometimes I'm doing server admin, I'm trying to my thoughts.
Yeah.
So it gives you back that human capacity.
Right.
Where it would have been, you had to spend a week or spend 2 weeks doing the same thing.
And yeah, and as well, what one thing to kind of emphasize here is that you can sometimes break things down into like a general like AI agent and tooling for the AI agent to use. So that research script, when I got it, the AI agent to research a new store to add to the site, there's actually a Python script that gets run as part of that is a deterministic bit that goes ahead and does a certain amount of checking. Well, the results that come back are then interpreted, and then the AI then decides where it goes from there, right? So in your Kubernetes example and checking on Kubernetes stuff, you can give it certain tools to say, okay, this is how you check the cluster. This is how you get on here. This is how you get a report of this or that or whatever. So that's one thing to bear in mind is you don't necessarily need the AI to do everything, but you don't then need to have a script to do everything. Because beforehand, you would have written a whole script, a bash script, to go ahead and do that. And the thing being is that's all great, but it takes a long time and it can be quite fragile because suddenly a command changes, the next version of a tool, and suddenly the command line arguments are slightly different or something like that, right? And you've then got to update that. Whereas you can get a lot more flexible and I would say robust approach by splitting it up and having a AI agent and then a series of tools, because the agent can actually run it and go, well, wait a minute, there's an issue here, so I need to now run this other command to check it and whatever, and come back with the results. So, yeah.
In the area of learning, I know it can seem daunting, depending on the skill. To learn a new skill, but they're at a stage now where AI can be a great.
Yes.
Depending on the skill, of course.
Yeah.
Skill where you could even, I've done this myself. You could even create
of course
a sandbox.
Yeah.
You could design your own course.
Yeah.
You could even create a sandbox. Like I did this for myself, where it's like, hey Gemini, you're gonna simulate a SQL environment.
Right.
And this will allow me to test the SQL queries. And
yeah.
also tell me how strong or weak the SQL query is.
Yep.
And also which SQL engines it good with. So is it good with Postgres versus MySQL
right.
versus Azure? Where this syntax may fail, where it will succeed.
Yep.
Professional best practices, and that way you can keep yourself. You can learn the skill.
Yeah.
But also have a way to keep yourself sharp. You don't necessarily mentor. Having a human mentor would be helpful, but if one is not available, the AI can be that mentor to help you skill up.
Write me a 5-week course on how to learn Rust, for example, right? You can come back with something you can then go through and actually, so it is very good at learning that. And again, caveat, these things can make mistakes. They're not all perfect, but I would say as they kind of say, was it perfection is the enemy of the good? Yeah. So that's kind of the approach I take with this. A lot of times as well, bear in mind with a lot of these toolings with AI stuff, sometimes it'll fail, sometimes it'll be repeated. So if you're creating tooling, then make it, idempotent so that if you run the same command twice, that it doesn't necessarily cause the thing to happen twice, right? Or that it can be repeated. And and you know, that will make things a lot better. Yeah, good approach. Yes, please. Welcome.
I'm going to ask a little bit about how you build for the future.
Sure.
Like one of the things that I feel is relevant is like a lot of the times by the time
Right.
and so part of what you're building is an opportunity for maybe a current industry or a different industry in the present moment, but
Yeah.
also having to spend. I'm curious, like, what do you do for you to kind of
Right. Okay, yes, that question is all about sort of how do you look towards the future to find out what the sort of future problems are to solve, where things go in the future versus just what's around now. I don't know. I mean,
like just a personal.
I mean, personally, everything that I've done there is scratching my own itch, right? I wanted to find out where events were. I couldn't find out where they were. I wanted to find out what was going on in Parliament because I'm here on the welcome stamp. I'm an immigrant here. It's like, okay, what changes are being made to the Citizenship and Residency Bill, for example, right? How do I find that out? You know, I'm trying to buy some things and I don't want to go driving around Carter's and Koeman and Do It Best and whatever to find it. So there's got to be a better way to do that. So most of these things have come around literally from me scratching my own itch. And that's the thing that I would urge people to look at is, you know, you will all have some kind of friction or notice some sort of friction or something like that that can, you know, maybe be improved in some way. And again, these are all, I mean, if you look at all these tools here, if you gave them to the average person, they probably wouldn't look at that and go, that uses AI, right? I mean, in a lot of people's minds, AI are, okay, it's taking over the world and it's killer robots and it's, you know, whatever, you know, data mining and all this kind of stuff. Whereas here it's like, no, it's just telling you that it can find a curtain rod, right? So I think there's a lot around using AI in contexts where people might not necessarily think of it, right? And a lot of that, again, it's around trying to automate things, make things easier, making data more accessible, right? You know, the you heard in Parliament thing, if you were to sit down and watch all of those videos, it would take you about 7 weeks, I think I worked out, to watch all of those videos back to back, right? You're not going to do that, right? So to be able to go in and search and say, okay, you know, I want to find out what changes are happening to the such and such bill, right? And they can bring it up for you. So mostly it's about finding existing information, existing processes, and seeing how they can either be offered to a new audience, made more efficient, made faster or easier to use, or cheaper or more accessible. So, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Services and things. I know so many,
Yep.
so many persons on such a
Yeah.
regular basis. It's the same. I'm really fascinated with you. I know you didn't get into it for reasons. Personal administrator, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's tools like I mentioned. There's tools like OpenClaw, for example. That is an AI that actually does things, right? Clears your inbox, sends emails, etc. Not directly with OpenClaw. I haven't played with that yet, but I. Yeah.
But a phone with it is try to keep it in a sandbox so that it doesn't.
Right. So yeah, this is the thing. There's several different, you know, open clause, one, zero clause, and others. There's a whole bunch of different ones that came out. A lot of them have this nomenclature. Claw that came from the lobster, I think it is. It was on as a mascot of one of the projects. but there is this sort of tension between, do I keep it in a sandbox so it can't run amok and cause complete havoc, but then it doesn't necessarily have access to everything I want it to do. If I want it to be able to do everything as me and go ahead and send that email or reply that WhatsApp or whatever it might be, then it needs to be able to be me, right? So it needs to have access to everything that I have access to. And this is where, some people have had trouble because there's been various exploits, for example, where somebody has sent a WhatsApp message to somebody and said, hey, send me the seed phrase to your cryptocurrency wallet. And it's gone, oh, yeah, sure. Fine, here you go. Boing, account drained, right? So, yes, you have to be a little careful, and there is a tension between it. But that's why I built, let's see if I can show it here. Can I zoom in on here? No, I can't zoom in on here. I don't know if you can see this. So this is Tali. This is the AI personal assistant that I have, and 12:30 this morning. Okay, brain fried. Got the slides for tomorrow's talk mostly done. Going to get up in the morning, give them a final polish before I run through, and then the actual talk. Just respond about, whoa, 12:30 a.m. Saturday. Your brain is definitely fried for a reason. You've been crushing it today. Since the AI Tools talk is actually today at Pelican House, best thing you can go and do for those slides now is go and get some solid sleep, right? So you've done the heavy lifting, final polish, run through, get some rest, right? So this tool, Tali. I can say whatever. Also to do, send follow-up emails from the meeting this morning. Okay, got that. Send up meeting, Google Cloud, right? So this is a personal assistant, so to speak, but it doesn't have the ability to do kind of everything that something like OpenClaw does. So it's much more constrained. But again, and that is in some ways one of the things to think about. It's like, well, if AI can sort of solve everything, then what do I want it to be solving, right? Sometimes there's a temptation to make things do absolutely everything. I'm more of a try and solve one thing well type person. So that's how I try and approach it. Oh. Yes. Depends upon what sort of administrative task. So for things like managing servers and stuff like that, for SSHing and setting stuff up, I use MinMax M2.5 because it's really fast. It's cheap, it's really fast, but it's pretty capable. It's kind of similar in level to Sonnet, Sonnet 4.5 from Anthropic, but it's a lot cheaper. So that's very good and fast. Sometimes though you need but it doesn't have vision, so it can't like see screenshots and stuff. Some of them are better at more visual things. Like I use Google Gemini 3 Pro if I want it to create something more creative as an admin task. So I'm like, okay, come up with a post about this or a description about this or whatever it might be. Then I use a different model for that. So I guess it depends. You have to play around with and see. I mean, one of the things I do within OpenCode, for example, is I took the transcript of some of my talks and a random selection of emails from my sent box. I gave it to Gemini and I said, from this, create a writing style for me, and I then have that in OpenCode as a skill, as a writing style skill. So I'm like, okay, if you go to write a blog post, use this skill for me. So it sounds more, it's in my tone, using my phrasing, speaks the way I speak rather than sort of generic AI speak, right? So you can, customize things quite a lot in that regards. Yeah. Peter.
Hi, I'm a programmer. I have been using Claude.
Yes. Yeah. How are you finding it?
It's a lot of fun. It's
Yeah, okay.
incredibly scary. So I
Okay.
gradually. But what I really want to talk about is the gap between capabilities of all that. 5% of all 500 zero value.
Mm. Mm.
And that puzzled me, but perhaps not with the gap.
Yeah.
Find
Yeah.
value. At one stage, the technology itself,
Mm-hmm.
February AI is nothing like January AI,
Yep.
March AI.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But business in general does not operate at those speeds, but we
Yep.
operate at
Yeah.
speeds. The faster you are.
Yeah. And especially within small businesses as well. I mean, I literally had somebody call me up yesterday who was like bouncing around some ideas for a course they wanted to do around small businesses and AI and using it in far more sort of practical terms of, okay, this is what I can do. And, you know, this doesn't have to be big, like groundbreaking stuff, because there is that gap there, as you say, right? And it's like, okay, you know, what can my sales lady do with AI in terms of looking at it and say, okay, these are the products I offer and they're at this price. You know, give me some feedback, right? Or do some research on prices, or what other things could I make? Or these are the ingredients I use. What other things could I make and sell based upon what I already have or the market I already serve? You know, and it might not necessarily know the answer. This is the key thing, is that it might not necessarily know the answer, but it certainly helps promote the discussion and the thinking, right? So you're like, okay, I've got a car. I go to Port Vale Sugar Factory. I sell to the workers there. I sell chicken, rice. I sell beers especially on a Friday when they've got this. You know, what else can I do, right? And it might come back and they say, well, based upon all of that, well, you know, maybe they might want this other product or this other thing that can be offered. Yes, please.
When it comes to the failure, it's written out on the AI. So I'll give a rough example. A company may have a production floor, and they may say, we have some friction, and we're not able to collect all the data from our production floor.
Yeah.
So now they want to use a person like me or someone in this room to say, well, we want to capture all this data from the production floor.
Yep.
However, even if you implement that, that's not going to solve the problem, because the staff that were entering the data wrong on paper are still going to enter the data wrong into the system.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the last case is so you might want analytics to see, you know, how much she's spending in making shows and how much she's making. Like you said, with the same financial stuff you did.
Or corresponding with, you know, okay, I need to write a letter to the bank to get a loan, right? Or whatever it might be. Like, how can I draft this? Because for a lot of people, that might not be something they've ever done, right? They don't know that. You know, I'm actually in a dispute with a tax authority back in the UK with, like, they mischarged me on something, right? Now, I'm kind of like, right? Whereas I actually ran this all through ChatGPT to come up with it. It's like, okay, slow down a bit, right? This is the key point you need to establish first, this particular fact, right? So don't ask them about this. Ask them first about this to confirm this. And then once you know that, then you know whether or not to go down path A or path B to get this resolved, right? So it's kind of like, and I'm like dumping all my information at it and saying, okay, what do I do here? And it's kind of going through and saying, okay, yeah, it looks like this particular payment was coded wrong in this, but first of all, you need to actually work out where it was coded wrong on what particular year before we can actually go ahead and get it recoded, right? And that kind of thing. So it's kind of given me a script that I can use and call up and say, okay, I'm calling about this. This is what I need to find out, et cetera, right? So I think it's great for that. Yes, Peter.
This week I had an interesting. I'm having a little bit of a dispute. It was annoying me. I was in a bad mood, and I gave it all to Clark. So
Yes.
here is WhatsApp chat.
Yeah.
Here is the email thread. What should I do? And it was remarkably coherent. And then I'm lucky enough to have a son who's a lawyer, so I said it to him, does this make sense? He said, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's great for that stuff. I use it a lot to, okay, take the emotion out of this email that I'm about to send, right? Because I'm about to kick off here, right? And I need you to calm this down a bit before I send it and make it more and a more effective email rather than a emotional vex email, right? So yeah, that's what I do. But yeah, and getting information together. I mean, there was, I might be able to see if I can find it as an example. So I've been building all these products, and for me, they were just scratching my own itch. They seemed like fairly random products. There didn't seem to be any coherent narrative towards them. Now, I was going to go and meet a podcaster here in Barbados, and just for a chat, but I wanted to try and frame what I'm doing with respect to her podcast and the topics that she's had on her podcast. Now, I've watched a number of her podcast episodes, and they're great, but there's a lot of information in there. So I got, again, this is ChatGPT I used, I got it, and I said, okay, go to this podcast, go through all of the episodes, summarize them. Now, from the information that I've given you, work out how best I can relate what I'm doing to what has been discussed so far in these podcasts, come up with it. And the amazing thing was that it came back with a whole new framing and narrative that I hadn't even really noticed before, which has influenced some of what I'm talking about today, and this whole notion of Barbados as a like civic lab to test these ideas in a way, and it kind of worked out the relation and the common thread between all the things I've built in a way that I hadn't even realized. And when I looked at it, I was like, okay, that's obvious now, but I hadn't even thought about it that way. But by putting all the information in it, and one of the interesting things being is like some of these tools, like as you folks here probably already know, but like ChatGPT specifically does have a long-term memory between the conversations. So if I go and say, I want to go and do this, or I want to do that, it will go, okay, you're in Barbados, so or it knows about me from my previous conversations. So ChatGPT specifically, I use a lot for brainstorming because it has a lot more context and pulls up stuff. It's like, oh yeah, well, your other project that does this, well, you could use that as well, right? Whereas I don't think many of the other of that sort of ilk actually have. Oh, I think Claude may have introduced it recently, this sort of memory thing, but yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, thanks a lot, everyone. And I'm sticking around, so if anybody wants to chat about stuff, great, but thanks very much. And thanks once again to Zindi for organizing this and GovTech for sponsoring. So, yeah.